I really like that moment. It's hard to be somber when we play that little note. So as you heard me talk to the kids, I'm starting out with spit and mud today. And the last time we had this gospel was Lent 4 in 2020. And we had just experienced our first week or so of social isolation. And the thought of spit as a curative was really repugnant. And now, 3 years later, I find that I'm even more repulsed by spit and all other bodily fluids. And I'm so much more aware of my nasty little grandchildren and the fact that, oh my gosh, how many times each minute do they have their hands in their mouth or their nose? Even the big ones. Yeah, Abby, don't even, you weren't listening to the children's moment. You know, you can't deny it. Okay, last May, I was in Philadelphia, and I went to Dr. Mutter's Medical Museum, where I picked up a souvenir refrigerator magnet that says, "Spit means death." And it was a phrase that was used a lot during the Spanish influenza. And I have always worried about this story, but as I told the kids, apparently in Jesus' time it was okay to, if you were important, to use it. And even this guy named Pliny the Elder wrote a whole chapter about using spit. It was good for anything from poisonous snake bites to averting the evil eye. Haven't you seen people, somebody threw a curse at them and they had to spit on the floor? That averts the evil eye. But anyway, the use of mud, we can understand. I mean, after all, we're made from it. But today, the gospel is not really about how Jesus cured the blind man. That's just an interesting part of the story. It kind of gets your attention. You know, as human beings, we're very tactile. And as Episcopalians, we like lots of visible signs. And so the dirt that Adam was made from and spit, and having it put upon his eyes, probably strengthened the man's faith because he could feel something happening. If you think about it, when we anoint people or when we lay hands on, the laying of hands is not a magic, but it can strengthen our faith to actually feel what's happening. And I know it's often easy to get lost in wanting to know the how of something, but we need to make sure that in wanting to know how it's done, we don't get blinded to the truths that are being told. We don't need to get so wrapped up in a story that we neglect the message. The reading begins that way today with the disciples doing the same thing, worrying about details. You know, not worrying about sin as much as trying to understand the nature of sin. The man's blindness, they wanted to know, is it his parents' sin or is it his own sin? And just like today, everybody wants to know, why do bad things happen? So it wasn't odd for the disciples to bring it up. There had been a lot of rabbinic discussion about sin, its nature, and man's culpability. Now, you know, I could understand the part about the parents sinning, but sinning before we were born, and I had to research that a little bit, and I did find one instance where when Rebecca was pregnant with Jacob and Esau, the Lord had told her it was twins, but she was disquieted. Apparently there was lots of tussling going on in her womb, and so she inquired to the Lord about it. Why is there this struggle? And the Lord says they were already fighting for supremacy. Now, the other thought about the parents being the ones to sin, it's easier for us to believe because we want to know what caused things to happen. And if you look towards the Bible, you can find it in the Old Testament. If you think about it, Moses' sister, Miriam, she was plagued with leprosy after she was disobedient. You know, Lot's wife turned into a pillar of salt. Look at Job. There's a whole lot of things in Job that can lend itself to that. And many of us, even though we could probably name all 10 commandments, don't realize that after make no graven image, that it states that if we bow down to them or worship them, our jealous God will punish our children for the sin to the 3rd and 4th generation. So we get a lot of stuff we think, honestly. Now, I had a Sunday school teacher when I was 12, Miss Athana Brown. I thought she was about 100 years old, and I knew she had been teaching 12 and 13-year-old girls since time began. She was a very strict interpreter of the scriptures, and she never hesitated to apply her narrow view of the Bible in order to instruct us on how to live our lives. She was certainly concerned about the temptations adolescent girls were faced with and gave us the Christian rules she had gotten from the Bible that we needed to live by. Don't dance, though I really don't think I ever saw that in the Bible, but she said that the rhythms and the tones of the music might stir up emotions that we were too young to control. Okay, that went right over. Don't drink, something about losing inhibitions. Well, we were young, we didn't drink anyway. But she also said, don't date a Catholic, because what if you fell in love and then you were forced to marry outside the Christian faith? Her opinion, not mine. I see a lot of you out there. But anyway, we didn't pay much attention to her and just relegated most of it to the fact that she was old and out of touch. But the one most hateful and damaging thing she told us adolescent girls, that has stayed with me for more than 50 years, is that she said that babies born out of wedlock who had disabilities were the result of the mother's sin. Yeah, horrid. And her proof, though, she said, was in the Bible, and she quoted something about the sins of the father are visited upon the children. Most of the time, I didn't go home from church and tell my mother anything that happened in Sunday school, but that day I told her what Miss Athana said, and my mother assured me it was not true, and she also said I never had to go back to Miss Athana's class. It's no different than today, though, right? Sin and sinners are much discussed. Blame and judgment are so much easier to define than our responses to it. But Jesus quickly dismisses the disciples' questions and answers neither the man nor his parents sinned. He was born blind so that God's works could be revealed in him. You know, we don't need to waste our time these days figuring out what we did wrong to bring down a pandemic, or what we did wrong that caused cities to be destroyed by earthquakes and homes destroyed by tornadoes. Because catastrophic events happen. Who sinned? No one. Phenomena such as these are not the judgment of an angry or uncompassionate God. So no, sin really wasn't the topic today in our gospel. Sight and light are the focus today. In the reading from the Old Testament, the Lord tells Samuel not to focus on appearance or height when looking for the next king, because that is how mortals see. They look on the outward, but the Lord looks on the heart. And then we get to Paul, who tells us in Ephesians to live as children of the light. For the fruit of the light is found in all that is good and right and true. Try to find out what is pleasing to the Lord. And then we come to today's gospel. A man born blind through no fault, but a man whose healing could be used so that God's works might be revealed. Jesus said, I am the light of the world, and then he brought that light to the beggar. Jesus put mud on his eyes, and when he washed it off, he could see. I do want to say that some have interpreted the part about the man was born blind, and that then could be used to reveal God's work in the world. And I just want to say that I don't believe that we are to think that someone born with affliction that affliction is given them only so they can be an example for us. But instead, God can take how we are and use that for his works. And of course, the Pharisees couldn't accept this miracle. How were your eyes opened? They kept asking him. And each time he said, well, you know, this guy named Jesus put mud on my eyes and told me to go wash it off. They wouldn't let up. They kept questioning him. And then they went to his parents and questioned them. They said their son was of age. He could answer for himself. Pharisees are never satisfied, so they called to the man again and questioned, how could this happen? And after so much interrogation, I can only imagine that this man was pretty fed up. And so he, with his eyes open, probably wryly asked, hey, you guys asking because you want to be disciples too? I don't know. They became enraged and threw him out, so I guess they did not. But Jesus, after hearing that the man had been driven out, found him and said, do you believe in the Son of Man? And this man, who was blind from birth, was also spiritually blind, because someone who could not see was not allowed in the temple or the sacred areas, because they were afraid in their blindness they might touch something, and the other people didn't want them to defile anything. So this man would not have heard much. And so he answered, well, who is he? Who is this Son of Man? Tell me so I may believe in him. And Jesus said, you have seen him, and the one speaking with you is he. He then said, Lord, I believe. And he worshiped him. And then Jesus tells the message for the rest of us. I came into this world for judgment so that those who do not may see, and those who do see may become blind. You know, the Pharisees and all their goodness, after all, they were good students of the Torah, of what they had learned. They were good students. And they kind of probably pulled their shoulders back and said, surely we are not blind, are we? And Jesus said, if you were blind, you would have no sin. But now that you say we see, why does your sin remain? The man born blind sees well, and the Pharisees are the ones who refuse to see it. And so we get to what I told the kids. Once you can see, you have no more plausible deniability. Once we are aware of sin, we can't use the excuse that our eyes are clouded. For the Pharisees, and probably for most of us, the truth is often hidden by our need to control others and our need to be in charge, our need to think we know everything. But what if they had looked at the beggar through eyes unclouded by sin? Then they probably could have seen the healing for what it was, a miracle. So today's message, we need to wipe the mud from our eyes that obscures the light of Christ. And then if we clear our eyes of the film that obscures and muddles, then like the blind man, we can be among those in whom God's works can be revealed. I washed, and now I see. We too have been washed. It happened at our baptism. And because of that baptism, we too should be able to see. By water, the baptismal prayer says, we have been raised to a new life, a life with a discerning spirit. Just like the man who was blind from birth, because of our baptism, we are able to look at what is going on around us and say with a faith as firm as the man who was healed, Lord, I believe. And if we believe and if we acknowledge that belief, then we can have the true sight that comes from faith. We are all capable of having a vision that is needed to see those around us. But we need to prove that our eyes are open. We need to show that the light shines in us. And we can only do it by making sure that we acknowledge and see those who are scared, lonely, angry, anxious. Washing the mud from our own eyes allows for a spiritual awakening that allows us to see the opportunities to work within our community, to see our neighbors. The light of the world has come, and we have no excuse. We cannot say, oops, I forgot. Though I will never believe that evil happening in the world is a judgment from a compassionate God, I do believe that even during the bad times, God's works can be revealed to us. In bad times, because we have the light, we must use it to see the needs of others and to see how truly thankful we need to be for all that we have been given. So let us remember this week to respond with generosity and prayer and assistance to those in need and in comfort to those alone. Let us live as children of the light. Amen.